Hey everyone, welcome back to Red Pen Revision. Today's lesson we're going to be learning about photosynthesis and applying our knowledge to past paper questions. So feel free to like, share and subscribe if that is something that you find helpful or interesting. So let's first start off by defining some key terms. Photosynthesis, let's split that word into two. Photo means light and synthesis means to make. So this is a process which plants use to make glucose from light energy. Now, glucose is a type of sugar which plants use to grow and survive and do various chemical processes with. So the sugar is a form of energy. The other two key points up at the top, we've got chloroplast, which is an organelle, and this is a structure which is found inside a plant cell. If you're unsure about organelles and plant cell biology, I do have a video which revises that, so you can go and click on that afterwards. Chlorophyll is a green chemical. Sometimes it's called a pigment or a dye, but the key point to note is that it's a green colour, and this is what gives plants and the leaves of plants that green colour. It's the chlorophyll that's found in there, and the chlorophyll is what actually absorbs that light energy. Now, the other key word I want us to look at is biosynthesis. Now, biosynthesis, we know synthesis means to make, and bio is something to do with biology. So we're making something from glucose in this case. So biosynthesis of glucose. In the exam, they will ask you to mention or state 4 uses of glucose, or why does a plant need glucose in the first place. And the ideas you would say, or the points you would give, would be to store it as starch. This is the storage molecule of glucose in plants. You've got proteins or amino acids. You could also mention cellulose, and this is for cell walls. And lastly, plants can use glucose to make lipids, and that's found most often in the seeds of the plant. So, photosynthesis, we need to define this and kind of give a bit more information here. So the best way to do that is to use an equation. So the equation for photosynthesis is carbon dioxide plus water goes to make glucose, our sugar, and oxygen. And as you can see, oxygen is a gas, carbon dioxide is also a gas. We ourselves breathe in oxygen and release carbon dioxide, and plants do the absolute opposite. They take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. So we work together in that way for us both to survive. It's a symbiotic relationship. So carbon dioxide and water, how do they even get into the plant in the first place? Plants have something called a stomata, and a stomata is like an open doorway into the leaf. It allows carbon dioxide to enter the leaf and the oxygen produced to be removed. Water, we know, can be absorbed by the plant through the roots. But once it gets to the roots, how does it get to the leaf? Because we need to remember, photosynthesis happens in the leaf cells, the cells of the leaf. That's where the chlorophyll is. So the roots actually are connected to the stem of a plant, and inside the stem we have a part of the stem called the xylem, which actually allows water to be taken up from the roots at the bottom to the leaves at the top, where the process of photosynthesis happens. So I mentioned before we need light energy, and this light energy is absorbed in the plant, in the chlorophyll of that plant. Okay, so this chlorophyll is found inside the leaves of the plant, and the light energy is absorbed. Now, because light energy is absorbed, this means that this reaction is what we call an endothermic reaction. Okay, so photosynthesis is an endothermic reaction. It absorbs energy. Okay, so if you ever see the word endo, it means to absorb. Exothermic reactions release energy. Okay, so we're absorbing that light energy in this process. Now, another thing I'd just like to point out, I will do a video on adaptations of plants and leaves, but what I do want to mention is the term palisade cell. A palisade cell is just a simple, basic plant cell, which you've probably seen loads of times before in textbooks and things. It's just a typical plant cell. Essentially, all it's saying is this is where photosynthesis happens. This is the cell it happens in. Okay, and these palisade cells make up leaf. Okay, so you've got your leaf of a plant. It's completely green because of the chlorophyll, the green chemical. The green chemical absorbs that light energy, allows carbon dioxide and water to react together to make the glucose, our sugar, and the oxygen. The whole point of photosynthesis is to make glucose so that the plant can actually grow, divide, and survive. Because as we mentioned before, glucose can be used to make the cell walls of cells. It can be used to make lipids for seeds so it can reproduce, etc. So in your GCSE exam, you will be asked to talk about something called a limiting factor. And the limiting factor basically means a factor or something which will prevent the rate of photosynthesis happening. What stops or slows photosynthesis? That's what this means, okay? Limiting factor is just something that limits the rate of photosynthesis. So the first limiting factor would be light intensity, okay, because we know we need light energy. The second limiting factor could be carbon dioxide concentration. How much carbon dioxide can actually be used with oxygen to make the glucose. And the third one is temperature. And temperature is really important because inside the plant cells, you have lots of enzymes which you work at specific temperatures. And if they don't have a high enough temperature, they will be too slow and they won't get the reaction done quick enough. But also, if the temperature is way too high, they actually stop working. So on your graphs, this is a graph against rate of photosynthesis. So rate of photosynthesis, ROP. Light intensity graph will look a little bit like this. The carbon dioxide concentration graph will look the same, and temperature will look like a mountain peak. So let's explain and describe what's happening here. A lot of the time you'll be asked to interpret these graphs, so it's important that we see if we can do that. So as you noticed at the beginning, all the graphs have a linear straight line, meaning as you increase the light intensity, the rate of photosynthesis increases. If you increase the carbon dioxide concentration, you have a faster rate of photosynthesis, more temperature, higher temperature, more glucose is made because you've got a higher rate of photosynthesis. That's great. However, at these points on the graph, you can see that the graphs have begun to peak, or they've actually begun to level off a little bit. So this is what we call a plateau. And sometimes you may have heard of the word optimal, an optimal condition. This is basically where the amount of light at this point is the best, the amount of carbon dioxide concentration is the best, and the temperature is at its best. You will not get any more glucose being made in these scenarios, here, here, or here, because there's even if you try to put more light, as you can see, even if you try and put more light here, even if you try and put more carbon dioxide, even if you increase the temperature, you're not going to get higher than this point of photosynthesis. That basically means at this point, it's the best condition for carbon dioxide, light intensity, and temperature because you've got the most rate of photosynthesis, but it also means that there is another factor which limits the rate of photosynthesis. So for example, light intensity, at this point, the limiting factor has now going to be concentration of carbon dioxide, or it could be temperature. In the case of carbon dioxide concentration, no longer is that the limiting factor. It's actually going to be temperature or light intensity. Okay, it's one of the other ones. And with temperature, it's no longer the limiting factor. It's going to be carbon dioxide concentration or light intensity. Okay, that's the limiting factor. Now, what I do want to mention about the temperature graph, you can see it's going down. The rate of photosynthesis is actually decreasing when we increase the temperature further than this optimal point. And the reason for that is because the enzymes have denatured, and this basically just means they've stopped working. The active sites have been distorted and they no longer work. Okay, let's have a go at some past paper questions. Pause the video now to have a go on your own. Okay, thank you for unpausing. Let's go through the answers. So, complete the equation. Carbon dioxide plus water goes to make glucose and oxygen. Notice that I have used words and not symbols. I have not written oxygen or H2O because they have written it in words. That means I need to write in words as well. You only get the mark for words. Next one. What type of energy does the plant use? It uses light energy. Which part of the plant absorbs the energy needed for photosynthesis? This is the chloroplast. And you can also say chlorophyll in brackets as well. It's probably worth in this case to write both because sometimes I've seen in the mark scheme that you only need to write one of them, but I would always write both. So that implies light energy is absorbed in the chlorophyll found in the chloroplast. It says here plants need energy to make glucose. How do plants get this energy? It's worth 2 marks, so you need to say 2 things. You would need to say light energy is absorbed by the chlorophyll in a process called photosynthesis. My biggest tip for you when answering questions like this is to always see how many marks it is worth. Next question, pause and have a go on your own. Okay, thank you for unpausing. Let's go through the answers. It says the graph shows the effect of concentration of carbon dioxide on the rate of photosynthesis. What is the maximum rate of photosynthesis shown here on the graph? And you've got an answer in arbitrary units. So what I would do is look at the peak, find the peak of the graph, and you can see that the answer is 20. Some students may get caught out and write 0.12. But remember that we've got arbitrary units, and this is arbitrary units. The next question says, suggest one factor that is limiting the rate of photosynthesis at point X when carbon dioxide is not a limiting factor. You could have said temperature or light intensity here. Either is absolutely fine. Hopefully that helped you with your GCSE studies. If it did, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share this video to anyone who may be struggling or needs a bit more support. And feel free to comment in the comments if you would like further videos about anything else. Have a lovely day and good luck with your revision.